You now tuned into the hottest podcast in the world, the Stay Woke Podcast, right here on the SonicBreakdown.com.
So welcome back to another Stay Woke Podcast. This is D-Ray Brinson. And of course, you know this. The Stay Woke Podcast is presented by the SonicBreakdown.com. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. We're going to bring you a special podcast today about Gil Scott-Heron's song, B-Movie, off of the album Reflection. And we got a special guest. We got Uncle David. If you read my, my first review, he was mentioned in there. So read that review and you have some reference to him. So as we just listened to that album, the question that I want to, or that song rather, the question that I want to begin by asking you is, well, we should preface it a little bit, I guess. That song,
yeah, you can give a little background.
Yeah, that song was released in 1981, and Gil Scott-Heron is, if you don't know, you sleeping, you're not woke, so stay woke. And but he's a poet, artist.
Poet, artist, musician.
Yeah, there we go.
His most famous song was "Revolution Will Not Be Televised."
Exactly. So that's my first reference to him for me. So that's just a little bit of background. But again, we're gonna refer back to the song that we're talking about today, which is B-Movie. What was your first impression of the song when you first heard it, and give us some background to what was going on and things of that nature?
Okay, well,
if you can.
Yeah, well, I was just finishing up in college back in 81, and that was the year that Ronald Reagan was running for president, right? You know, as many of you may know, but let me fill in the historical details. Ronald Reagan was an actor. Right. And I remember him as a child as being the host of Death Valley Days, which was a series of Western television episodes where he was the host, and they sold, I think it was soap. Yeah, I think it was some kind of Baraxo soap.
Okay.
Right. So he would come in between segments and say, you know, we want you to buy Baraxo soap. You know, it's strong enough to clean up any kind of dirt, right?
Okay.
But before that, he was an actor in Hollywood, and he wasn't a real famous actor. I mean, I think his biggest role was George Gipp in The Legend of Newt Rockney, right? And I think he might have played the Gipper. I'm not really sure what his role was in there, but he was that kind of actor, right? He was, relegated to not the A-level actors like, you know, Henry Fonda, or Jimmy Stewart,
okay.
Right? Or John Wayne, right? He was like the guy you got if you couldn't get any of those guys, right? And once his movie career kind of fizzled, and he was doing that thing on TV, that kind of fizzled, then became active in, you know, union politics for actors, right? The Screen Actors Guild. Okay. And I think he was the leader of the Screen Actors Guild for a while. And he was actually a Democrat. Right. But then some transformation occurred, you know, probably something built on political expediency. He became a Republican, right? Ran for governor of California and won. Okay. And I think he ran for 2 terms. Right, in the late 60s, early 70s. And that was a pretty turbulent time in California, and of course in the country because of the Vietnam War. And he really came down hard on UC Berkeley protests. That was part of the free speech movement going on in Berkeley. And he ordered, state troops in there. And, he and this other guy named S.I. Hayakawa, who was head of the UC, basically cracked down on the students pretty hard.
And what was the basis of just because they didn't agree with what they were saying, or what?
Well, that's primarily it. I think the posture they were taking was that the United States was at war, right? We should be supporting the war and supporting our troops,
regardless of
without question whether the war had any merit or not.
Got it.
And this was a way to frame, if you had any political ambitions, this is one way to show that. You're a macho man, right? You're not going to take any guff. You're a super patriot and all this stuff, right? So he went on from there to become active in national politics, and to run against Jimmy Carter, right? When Jimmy Carter was running for a second term. And Reagan had his followers, right? He was from the Midwest. He had, he's, friendly enough, right? He had this.
He knew how to the walk the line politics maneuver, smooge. I should say.
Yeah. He's kind of a smooth character, kind of, gee, aw shucks kind of guy. Didn't seem to be too arrogant. Gotcha. And he won a number of debates against Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter was the governor of Georgia, right? He came up president. He was a very bright guy. He was. I think he had a degree in nuclear physics or something like that. Oh. But of course, he didn't come across as being that way. And because of, one particular event, the taking of the American embassy in Tehran, right, and the hostage crisis, put him at political limbo. Yeah. That plus the fact that Edward Kennedy mounted a challenge in the primaries against Jimmy Carter, which is generally not done within your party. You generally don't go against a sitting president. That kind of, showed his vulnerability. All right. So Reagan came along at the right time, right, with the right opponent. Right.
That's showing a lot of parallels to today in a lot of regards, but. Yeah, I'll touch on that later.
Okay, so the parallels I'm drawing here. So that's sort of the setup to the initial hearing of B movie, right? So the election came down, Reagan wins, right? And they're talking, and it was actually a pretty hefty margin in terms of popular vote. But if you kind of scrape the surface and look at what the numbers actually showed.
Yeah, deeper.
That, okay, he won with something like 52% of the vote, right? There's only two candidates running at that time. Okay. But something like 50% of the people who could possibly vote, right? The pool of potential voters, right, was 50% of those that pool actually voted. So if you looked at the total number of possible voters and the number of votes that he got, right, it was somewhere around 26%.
Okay, I get what you're saying.
All the total of all the possible voters.
So basically anybody that could have voted. Of course, not everybody always votes. Well, never. Correct. Actually, never. Yeah. There's never, I don't think, ever recorded. No, everybody that could vote voted.
No, the U.S. has amongst the lowest participation rate in voting of any of the major democracies in the Western world.
So out of that possible pool, like you said, only 26 actually voted for him. And then, of course, that says a lot right there in itself.
So the thing that kicked me off was after, let's fast forward to 2016 election. After that election, one of the victor's mouthpiece on television gets on and says, we had the most fantastic victory ever, right? It was a landslide and we have a mandate. Yeah. And then boom, I remember the first lines of B movie, which was mandate my ass,
So that instantly brought you back in. Prior to hearing that, have you re-listened to that album frequently or that track frequently?
Probably about 2 or 3 times in the last, since the election, let's put it that way. Okay. I haven't listened to the other songs on there, but this one in particular. But the parallels are stunning in a lot of ways. Some not coincidentally, right? When I say that not coincidentally, I believe that Trump's campaign was trying to align him with Ronald Reagan.
Because they saw a pattern, they saw something that worked, and they saw an atmosphere that fit these dynamics, and saw it as an opportunity to use it.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is that so that's what 35 years ago, something like that, 36 years ago. The same methodology worked. Right. In terms of, attracting voters. Yeah. One was to demonize minorities. right? The other is to say, the economy is going in the tank. The jobs are leaving the country. We need a new strong leader.
Creating fear and creating instability in areas that weren't as unstable or basically lying in essence.
Well, yeah. I mean, basically saying that everything's a mess when it isn't. But people bought into it, right? People bought into that narrative. And it's interesting because, you would think that in, close to 40 years that the evolution of folks would be different, right? One of the main things that comes out of that, the song B Movie is this, desire for the American, populace or a certain segment of it, right? To, look back upon some days that they think are better than what today is.
Yes.
Right.
And I wanted to touch on that real quick is because, I can't remember that there's a book out there. I can't remember the name of it, but I think it's called When Things Were the Same. And it basically touches on that idea or that theory of that a lot of times you think that about, let's say, domestic violence. They say that, it's worse now than it ever was. No, not really. If you think about those times, it's just the difference is how it was being reported.
Right.
A lot of it wasn't getting reported.
Exactly.
Or even if it was reported, it wasn't getting written down because the sheriff was like, Joe, don't do it no more.
Yeah, you guys kiss and make up.
Exactly. So like that idea of that it's getting worse or that things are really changing more than they are is unrealistic in some degree because it's just that nostalgic belief of you want to believe that those times were better.
Right. Yeah. Now the interesting thing is that, there seems to be this strong desire for nostalgia as Gil Scott-Heron brings up in the song and B Movie. Right. And, I remember seeing an episode of Scandal, in 2016, which, it parallels a lot of what's going on currently. But they had a candidate, an African-American candidate running for president, right, who was being asked a question about statements from another candidate who was modeled upon, Donald Trump.
Okay.
Right. And that guy wanted to make America great again. Right. So, the African-American candidate finally snapped and says, I'm going to really tell you what I believe, what I think about it.
Like he had enough.
Yeah. It's like, what do you mean make America great again? What's not great about right now, right? We have, an African-American president, right? Our economy is doing well. So what do you mean when you want to go back in time, right? What was a better time? When we had Jim Crow, right? When we had slavery, right? You got to wonder what that means.
Exactly.
Right?
Like at what reference point are you talking about?
Exactly. And another interesting parallel here is if you look back in Reagan's campaign posters, at the bottom of his posters, he had a slogan, "Let's make America great again." So that's where that came from. So that's what I'm talking about. The parallels, not necessarily by accident, by design.
Exactly.
Right.
And that wouldn't make a lot of sense because a lot of people were saying when he first was running that they couldn't see that he would win. They couldn't see that he'd make it past the primaries. They couldn't see that this. But before even the campaign started, well, not even before the campaign started, but from the Democratic side, you already saw the tension between Bernie and Hillary.
Yeah.
Like when you say that it was by design, it's like if I was on his team or if I'm that person that knows this knowledge about Ronald Reagan's campaign and how it worked and then it's like a red flag. Ooh, I can see how this is gonna bring them apart. Divided, they're gonna split some votes. That gives us a prime opportunity to fit right in here. And we know this strategy has worked before in this environment, so let's go with that. And so it's pretty ingenious, but it's scary at the same time.
Yeah. Well, that be it as it may, right? They had their strategy. The Democrats had theirs, right? The major problem here is that although there were over 200 million people registered to vote in the last election, 90 million of people stayed away from the polls, did not vote.
Yeah.
Right. Now, the other side of that problem, okay, let's take out those 90 million votes, right? Out of the 140 million votes that were cast or so, something like that. Trump got fewer than 50%.
Yeah.
Right. He didn't even get the most of all the candidates. Right. So if you look at this, right, he got 42%, let's say, of all of the votes that were cast for president.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then we go back to that same ratio of the pool of the total potential versus what he got.
Right.
Gives you probably 26, 27%?
Probably about 27%. Exactly. Right. So the whole thing that started this off was when, one of his talking heads said, "Oh, we want a landslide." It was a mandate. Right. And I said, mandate my ass. You guys didn't even get 50% of all the votes cast, much less of 50% of all the registered voters.
Yeah.
Right?
So there's in no regard is that a landslide in any shape or form.
No, but you keep repeating a lie. This was one of the things that Stalin, right, said was, you just keep repeating a lie, right? Eventually people will take it as true. Yeah. Right. And I have a friend from Bulgaria said, the communists use this all the time. And we have an expression. He says, if someone calls your sister a whore, nobody will listen to you when you tell them you don't have a sister. Yeah. Right. Once you get that, you get it out there, it's very hard to, to pull it back. It's like when you get angry at work and you send out a flame on email and you hit send. It's like, it's a little bit too late. Yeah. Right. Same thing with this, this so-called fake news. Right. So the fake news is out there to, to obfuscate, confuse, distort, right. Take time away from, the real issues. So he talks about those kinds of things too.
Yeah. He actually says the 27%, and he talks about the dividing of the parties. The other parallels is how he refers, and that, like, I didn't know. I mean, I knew that Reagan was an actor just because I've heard it referenced before, but I never knew to the degree at which his acting was. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
Because I won't say in the media, but it tends to be from the Republican Party when they mention him and the reverence that they speak of him, it gives you the impression that everything was great. He was the great actor, but of course they're going to say that. But so when you informed me about how his celebrity was as an actor, or his gift as an actor wasn't as great, because they're making it seem like he's Cary Grant. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
But that parallels to Donald Trump, because he is a celebrity, but he's not great at anything.
No, not really.
So, you know what I'm saying? Like, but that is the impression that they give of him as well, is that he's great at all these things. He's the best at everything. But, like, there's no evidence to prove that.
Well, there's one thing that he's excellent at.
Making money.
Well, I wouldn't say that. What he's excellent at is BSing.
Yeah.
Right. Now, when you talk, you brought up the money thing, right? He's a prime example of somebody that was born on third base and thought he'd hit a triple.
Gotcha. Well,
right?
Yeah.
Right. He was born with money, right? He inherited a lot of his wealth, and then he invested that wealth, right, in businesses, and he didn't lose it all, right? He tried to, but he didn't lose it all. But if you compare what he could have gotten out of that money, if he had taken that money and put it into, say, a mutual fund, right, and didn't do nothing, right, he would have made more money.
So that does
right.
speak to your business acumen. If
exactly.
You don't make more than what you would have if you just sat on it.
Yeah. And, his business acumen is really the ability to BS, right? So he has a name, right? A lot of the buildings with his name on it, he did not build, right? He sells his naming rights, right? Because he has some, a trade name, identifiable name. All right. So that's how he makes a lot of his money now. And it's debatable what his net worth is. Some people place it as low as $1.5 billion. Some people say it's, 5. Well, I should say he says it's around 5 or 6. Right. But that's again debatable. Right. Yeah. But the interesting thing about the parallels is that he really wanted to, be the quote new Reagan, right? The outsider that came in and clean house.
And that is what he pushed when he on his platforms. He really didn't have platforms, but anyways, but that's what he did push in his speeches and his the dialogue that he communicated to the public, which through Twitter and many other forms. So, that is interesting because again, I didn't think about that either in that form of Reagan, of him trying to be an outsider. But wow, that.
Yeah. So the parallels are stunning. And it's, like I said, it's not by accident, right? It was clearly, designed to go that way.
Now, my question to you, based off that, because I'm not the most politically savvy person out there. I'm not going to lie. I'm not even trying to front. But I would assume that somebody in the Democratic Party or somebody in the Republican Party that was running against him could have seen these signs because they are more abreast of campaign strategies. Because if you're trying to win a campaign, what are you going to do? Study other campaign strategies that have worked. And how they didn't spot this and somehow avoid it or bring it to light so that other people could do something.
I think, the major thing that Trump had going for him was the appearance of unsuitability, the appearance of having no chance to win.
So they took him for granted in that.
Right. So, people underestimated it, right? And said, well, he can use whatever strategy he wants. Right. But look at this guy. He has no experience. Right. He's basically a BSer. Right. There's no way he's going to win. And then on top of that, all of the polls were saying the same thing. Right. At least in the general election. Right. In the Republican side of things, in the primaries for the Republicans, everybody took him as a joke, and they figured that he would somehow fall out of the fray in 2 or 3 elections, right? But he kept winning, right? And in the beginning, it was easy for him to win because he's running against 16 other people, right? And he was probably the most famous,
the most known.
Name recognition of any of those candidates, and a lot of people just vote on name recognition, right? So he was able to outlast, some major candidates like Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio, and Kasich. And finally, when it came down, it was him. And everybody was shocked. They said, this can't be, but it was. Right. So he wins the Republican nomination, and the Democrats saying, oh, great, this is the best candidate we want. Right. Because this guy's no way he's going to win. He's a clown.
But this is, I have to say, then that's stupid on them.
Absolutely.
Because I'll give them a pass to a point. But to me, because I'm not going to lie. In the beginning, I was like, there's no way. There's no way I was like, there's like, especially based on what he was saying in public. I was just like, okay, there's no way. Like there, and then he got further and further. And then I was like, even before the primaries, I was like, okay, I'm getting a little worried here. We need to really start thinking about how this is going. But my thing is, at least at the primaries, I just feel like you can't take it for a joke at that point.
No, and you have to, it should be all out war.
That and then Brexit right before that. Yeah, because people were saying the same thing, and that right after Brexit, I remember Vance Jones saying, "Don't take this is the sign right here." I remember watching a Facebook Live tweet or a Facebook Live of him saying, "Guys, this is the sign. Don't keep on saying Trump can't win because this can happen to us." But yet, still, people, even in the Democratic Party, was still saying like, how does that?
Well, I've been reading up about a lot of things, because of this election. One thing I couldn't understand is how could somebody, like there's Peter Thiel, right, who's CEO of, I think he was one of the co-founders of PayPal. And I forget what the other one, Tumblr or something like that. But he supported Trump. And I was saying, well, this guy's not stupid, right? How can he support Trump? Right. And apparently he supported him because he believed that Trump was going to do the right thing with healthcare, right? Some kind of a single payer healthcare system. So the question in my mind was, how do people decide what basis to make a judgment on a particular candidate?
That is where I'm getting at. That is what I want to know, because that doesn't make sense to me either.
Yeah. So who is it? Fareed Zakaria. He has a show, GPS.
Yeah. It's on CNN, right?
Yeah, it's on CNN Sunday mornings. And he also writes for the Washington Post. He has a column there. So I think he says, I forget the title of the article, but essentially he wanted to understand how smart people, bright people, right, can look at one thing
and disregard everything else.
Disagree. Well, what I'm saying is they can look at one thing and half of them say come to one opinion about it, and half of them will come with a completely different opinion about it. Right. So it's a question of, how do you make these judgments, political judgments, right? Because it seems like political judgments are somewhat irrational.
Yeah, where life judgments, like if those questions were presented in a normal like life situation, I don't think those same people are taking that same path.
Yeah, correct. Like for instance, right? You say, well, Trump does this and he gets away with it, right? And Clinton does that, she gets whacked all over the place, right? And a lot of it has to do with, he pointed to this book called The Righteous Mind, right? And this is a book about moral psychology, right? And how people make judgments about things, right? And it says that initially the first judgment you make is with your gut or your heart, right? You form an emotional decision, right, based on any number of items. One could be your socialization, your history, what you look like, all those kinds of things. And what I liken it to is, when people look at somebody, right, if they're handsome and tall, they automatically give them certain attributes, and they get sort of the benefit of the doubt.
They trust them a little bit
more.
Right,
and they trust them a little bit more.
They're more likely to take their word, things of that nature.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas if you look a different way, short and dumpy in that kind of way, then they form another set of examples, set of opinions. A prime example of this is if you ever watched the TV show Columbo.
Yeah.
Right? Columbo was, his hair is always a mess. He had that rumpled trench coat. And he seemed like he didn't know what was going on. He's always, asking these questions and then walking away and said, oh, yeah, just one thing. Right. Right. And that really irritated all these, brilliant mastermind criminals who were trying to get away with murder. Right. And they just thought this guy's an idiot. They underestimate him. Right. And they had already formed an opinion. Right. So that
takes them off their game and makes them have a mistake. And that's how he catches them.
Exactly. Because what it came down to in terms of the book, The Righteous Mind, was that people make decisions based on their gut, right? And then if they're presented with any information, right, based on that first decision, they decide, well, can I accept that information? Right? Right? Or must I accept that information? Right. And there's subtle difference between the two, right? Really not so subtle. One is must I is immediately questioning the information that comes in. Right. Can I is like you're already accepting it.
No, you already accept it. It's just if you're now going to allow yourself to take it all in.
Can I allow myself to accept it, or must I? Think about if there's some kind of food that you like. Can I eat this ice cream? Yeah, I can eat this ice cream. Right. Or must I eat these greens?
Yeah, it's more, one is passive where one is more forced.
Exactly. And that basis is really what they talk about in psychology as confirmation bias, right? Once you make a decision about something or someone, right, be it positive or negative, right, rather than look for, quote, neutral information, right, that will, either justify or disprove your initial judgment, what you look at is how can I confirm my original opinion or original choice,
and ignoring anything that doesn't occur or confirm that information. So you're not open in essence to it. You're looking for what you're looking for.
Yeah. So if you look at the election in 2016, right, and the release of that tape, right.
If you didn't like Hillary already. Yeah, that was going to push you over and continue, because that's all you were looking for, something to confirm that she's not the person for you.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So the confirmation bias, right? Now, this guy uses this analogy in the book, The Righteous Mind, about, the elephant and the rider, right? He says that the rider is really the intellect, right, that, sees things and, makes judgments, impartially. But because he's only the driver of the elephant, he can't physically force the elephant one way or the other, right? So if the elephant's already, made up its mind to move, in one direction, no amount of pulling or cajoling is going to get that elephant to move.
Exactly.
Right.
So that decision is not up to you anymore.
Right. You kind of just say, all right, well, we're going this way, so let's make the best of it. Right. And that's kind of the confirmation bias. But if you can somehow get that elephant to move, right, then the rider got to go with them, regardless of whether the rider wants to go that way or not. Right. So I think a lot of what happened is if an individual can create enough goodwill, right, for their brand or persona, right, before they get out into the political space, they're out,
Basically, you have that equity to use.
Yeah, you're basically inoculated against certain things, right? And, you look at, Trump getting up there, I could walk down Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and nobody would care, right? It's almost that bad.
Yeah.
Right. So I think
that's a problem that society has, that we put so much power in these celebrities at, though.
Yeah. Now that brings up another song by Gil Scott-Heron. It's called "There Ain't No Such Thing as Superman." Right. Because I think one thing about American culture, right, in our culture of, superheroes, is that somehow an individual, is imbued with some kind of super power or super ability, right, that makes them unique, right? Allows them to, get bullets, maybe bulletproof and be super
strong, whatever that might be.
Here a little bit. But
good series. Check it out, guys.
Yeah, it is. It is. But it doesn't really exist in real life, right? There's no such thing as Superman.
Exactly.
Right. But people want to believe that, right? They want to believe that there's individuals that, have this unique ability to just make stuff happen. Right.
And at this time, it tends to be our entertainers, our athletes.
Yeah. You see somebody up on screen, they're immediately imbued with, oh, they must be special because they're on TV. Yeah. Right.
Just the idea of them being there and you're here.
Yeah. Now, hopefully that all changes now, because everybody, or let's put it this way, the barrier to entry, right, to be up on a video screen has come down quite a bit. Everybody's got
the internet, yeah.
Yeah, everybody's got their smartphone with video, right? So you can be on TV too, right? So there's nothing really special about that.
And I think, at a certain degree, I think the entertainment world is worried about that.
Oh yeah, they are.
Because, especially in the music world, because they're losing money. The major record labels are losing money because Chance the Rapper, Macklemore, all of them are showing that you can make millions independently.
Yeah, you can bypass all these guys.
Yeah, there's no more. Well, there is still gatekeepers, but those gatekeepers are getting less and less, as they would say.
Yeah. So the organized businesses are trying to figure out how to maintain their stranglehold on access, right? But at the same time, lowering the barrier to entry, right, to the media, right, then allows you entry for all this fake news.
Exactly. So there's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, exactly. And this election was sort of the perfect storm of all of these things, right?
Exactly, because there's a lot of fake news stories, inaccurate stories that were being said or seen on, people seeing it on Facebook, and it looks like a real news article, but they don't do the source checking, the fact checking, the deeper look, because let's be real. I won't say a lot of people, but there are people that are lazy, that are not going to look deeper because they have other things to do.
Yeah.
Let's face it. There's so much out there. So you're getting bombarded with so much information. I also, like I've been saying on other podcasts, I think that bombardment of information at such a rapid pace, besides the fact that you don't fact check or you don't feel like you have the time to fact check, I think it also desensitizes us to a degree because you have no time to sit with it.
Yeah.
And let yourself determine how you should feel about it versus how the world feels about it, because you don't have that time to really absorb it, like I said.
Yeah. I like to call it the squirrel effect.
Here's a neck. Oh, wow. I'm happy about this one. Oh, wait, there's another one.
Exactly. So, this guy sits up there with his Twitter account, and he just he just throws, it's like throwing the golf ball out there and the dog goes and runs to get it, right? The media just follows everything that comes out, and not everything he says is worth checking out.
Yeah.
right? And
A lot of it isn't.
And I think what you bring up is a very good point, that he brings out so many issues so rapidly, right? That, okay, the one issue by itself could be enough to sink him.
Like the Russia.
Yeah. But if the next day some, dossier gets leaked, right, that says all these other things, everybody's like running off to talk about that. And I have a couple of theories, personal theories of my own, which I cannot prove. Right.
And we'll call this section Conspiracy Theories by Uncle David.
Yeah, this is a conspiracy theory. Trump's tax form that was released, or that was given to the New York Times. I suspect very strongly that it was released by Donald Trump. Right.
And what makes you believe or think that?
Well, because he was able to spin it. Right. Because let's think about it. Right. If somebody really wanted to put out his tax returns, why would they release one that was so old?
Yeah, I didn't get that. That didn't make sense anyways,
right?
To me.
And this one was set up so it had a huge loss on it, right? Which he could then spin as saying, "Well, look, I'm such a great businessman. I took this loss and applied it to using the tax code to save myself taxes for the next 20 years." Okay,
yeah,
right. So so they immediately came out. The guy's a genius, right? His Giuliani, all those guys, right?
They're like, oh, that's smart.
So that's my first theory. The second conspiracy theory has to do with this dossier. The fact that the dossier information was dumped a day or two before his press conference, where he was supposed to be divulging himself of interest in his own company to remove conflict of interest. That became the news.
Rather than what should have been the news is all the things that would have put him in the hole at that.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Instead of all the stuff. And I think one of the key things that we forget is that if we're all looking at the left, somebody's sneaking around the right.
Yeah, it's the old magic trick, sleight of hand.
So if you can divert attention away, right? This is, a magic trick, right? Everybody is watching the diversion, and the trick is happening because you're not looking at what you should be looking at.
Exactly.
Same thing with this, divestiture nonsense at a press conference, right? Which was supposed to be a no-brainer, easy stuff, which was going to be announced in December, but somehow got postponed because they couldn't get their act together in time until January. And then since they really couldn't get their act together because he wasn't really doing anything other than letting his sons run the business and not really taking care of any conflicts, let's create some other information and get everybody talking about that, right? And I remember watching CNN that week, and Anderson Cooper and Kellyanne Conway got into it 25 minutes going back and forth about fake news regarding this dossier.
Yeah, I remember watching that and thinking, wow, like, and the thing that made it so odd to me is that after seeing that, people were still defending her, but she didn't explain anything.
No, she didn't. Let's face it, her job is to make her guy look as good as possible, right? And she'll do it regardless of whether she has to lie or not. Now, she tries not to lie by diverting attention, again, by not answering the question posed, but answering the question you want to answer, and just going around and around and around about that. The thing that really bugged me about it, though, was that Anderson Cooper was chasing her all over the place with that, rather than just, at some point in time, you just got to say, I'm not going to get a straight answer out of this person, and kick him to the curb, right? Just understand that.
I'll say this. I can understand him wanting, when I watched that interview, I can understand him wanting to do that because especially nowadays when people are saying that there's fake media, that we're not asking that I'm not a media member, but if you are a media member, that you're not asking the right questions. You're not probing deep enough. You're not checking sources. And that if kind of, let's say if that's playing in the background in your head, and you're doing that interview, you're going to track her down as hard as you can and try to get the answers that you're getting, because then you can justify, like, you see, I'm trying, like, this is what I'm literally trying to get this answer. I'm doing everything I can to get her to come out and give us the information that I know you guys want, that I know we want, that we really need to get. But like you said, but there is a point, and in the heat of that moment, I can see why it would be hard, especially if that's in the back of your head.
Yeah.
We need to prove. In a normal situation, yeah, you say, I tried, I pushed her. At this point, let's move on and see if I can get other pertinent information that I can get that we want, that's important. So yeah. I get that frustration, just because if that is playing in his mind, and who knows if that was, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, the media's in a very tough spot, right? Because, they need access to these people, right, in order to do their jobs, right? And the people that are the gatekeepers to the access, right, are really pretty capricious right now, right? They will drop your access at any moment. And
I think a part of the reason for that is more now than it has been. And I'm not saying it in a nostalgic manner, because I think it's always been that way to a certain degree.
Yeah, that's true.
But I think now they feel more apt at it, because there is so much way to get access to your fans, to your people of your brand, without.
Yeah, exactly. And they can go around you.
Yeah, they can literally go around you and don't necessarily need you. Like Kim Kardashian has made her living off of branding herself without a major, like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now she has or wherever that show's on, I don't know. But by staying on Snapchat, by staying relevant, like, in that regard, she's kept her fame to ridiculous levels. I think they said that show's been on like 18 or 14 years. Like,
yeah.
So
yeah,
that showed you that.
Exactly.
When I found, I was like, what? Like, so there's actually like kids like that were born and like about 10, 12 now, that's their Cosby's. That's their Family Matters. That's their Full House. Like, that's the shows that as a family that they're seeing, comparison to what I was seeing. The Jefferson, Good Time, like those shows. What is it? All in the Family.
All in the Family. Yeah.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that comparison that's to me is mind boggling as well. It's like, I don't know. It's just
that's interesting you brought up All in the Family, because the lead character in All in the Family, Archie Bunker, right, is in the same borough of New York as Donald Trump, Queens. And it seems to me that they hold some of the same attitudes and beliefs. Right?
Maybe that's what he was watching, and that's what has provoked his thoughts, and that's why he's the way he is.
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. I think that that show was pretty accurate about how people in that area, felt about things. Right? And the fact that Archie wasn't articulate, right? He wasn't well educated, right? I'm not saying he was dumb, just saying he wasn't well educated.
Yeah, there is a distinction.
Right. There's a difference between those two. Right. And I think the same thing holds for Trump. Right. He's not intellectual. Right. He's not stupid.
No, he's not
right?
either.
But I wouldn't say that he's well educated. Right. Outside of his particular business. Right. Now, he's probably got enough, knowledge, and
he's a promotion and marketing genius. I'll give him that.
Yeah. And, this. I hate to say this.
Him and Jerry Jones.
Yeah. I hate to say this about Trump, but think about this, right? When he was going through the Republican primaries, right? He gave each of his opponents a nickname. Now think about some famous athlete, right? Who used to do that, who was a master in front of the media, a master marketer.
Yeah.
Right.
I know where you're going, but I can't fix my mouth to say and put those two together, because
I'm telling you, this guy took a page out of Ali's book.
I knew, that's why I knew, but I can't put it, I can't, because Ali's the greatest of all time.
I understand that. And I'll tell you right now, I'm sure Trump will never cop to that, because not only would he not be admitting that he came up with it himself, right? Would be, diminishing his own brand. Yeah. Right. But a black man.
That's it.
And a Muslim.
You have two things that we know he's not too in favor of.
Right. So if that became something that people identified, I wonder what his core people would be thinking about. Right. This guy.
they would still go with.
Yeah, again, the elephant's going that direction.
Yeah, I was about to say they would just
Uh-huh.
what they would say is no, it's just a coincidence that they are boisterous, or you know what I'm saying. Any excuse in the world to not put it together, because just as we said earlier because I was watching videos about what Trump supporters were saying that they vote, especially women, because the Women's March and everything. So that's been heavy in the media, and they talked to two women, and one of the women said they did it because of his religious beliefs.
Trump's?
Yeah. And they said that he was, because he was pro-life. And so then the reporter asked, so what about everything else that he said and that he's done that doesn't go with the beliefs that you say you believe in based on the faith that you say you have? And then she was like, well, the life thing mattered more than everything else. And when we were at, Michelle's friend's party, and we talked to the Trump supporter there.
Oh yeah.
Which was a Latino man. I talked about this on another podcast, so check it out. That will be released. And he said that he voted for Trump because he disregarded all the Latin Mexican, because he was Mexican as well, not just Latin, but he was Mexican, and all the rhetoric and racist things that he said about Mexicans, because he felt that he was going to give middle America jobs back again.
Yeah.
And so that touches back on what you were saying earlier, but to me, it does, like, I can't, I just don't understand how you can take, if 10 things are said, 9 of them you disagree with, that one stands above all that one, you can disregard the 9.
Well, that's the whole point about this confirmation bias, right? Once you've made that choice, right, your rational mind shuts off, right? And you filter out any information that challenges your original assumption about a person, right? That's why, you can look at, somebody gets a girlfriend, right? And he falls in love with her, right? And she could do no wrong, right? And his friends could be telling him all kinds of stuff about her, right? She's stealing from you, doing this. Oh no, she's not doing that. Oh no, she's not doing. You make up excuses, right? Yeah. And the same thing happens in politics, right? You pick your guy, right? And they're your guy. Or same thing happens in sports, right?
Yeah, your team is your team.
Your team's your team, right?
Rain, shine. I know it is with my Niners, man. We've been going through it, so I can understand that. But see, to me, I definitely, like I said, I just admitted that I did it with my team. But my team's not going to affect my life.
Right. But again,
my president is going to affect my life. So I need my president to be on all. I need him to be on point more than he's off point.
Yeah. But again, if you've made your decision already that you like this guy, right? And that decision is an emotional decision, right? It's not based on any rational thought, right? After that, anything that, challenges that, you're going to dismiss it.
Why are we basing our opinions about our president?
We make that choice all the time, not just about the president, but about what clothes we like, what kind of car we want to buy. I'm telling you, at some level, what has to happen is people have to understand how their minds work, right? In order to counter that, right? If you understand that, you're apt to make an irrational choice based on emotion, right? Over rationality, right? Then somehow you have to figure out, well, how do I undo that, right? And make it a more objective choice. Right. That's a very difficult thing to do because first you have to be aware of the fact that you're making these choices. And a lot of these choices are subconscious.
Yeah, it's the known knowns, the known unknowns, and the unknown unknowns. You don't know, you don't know that you don't know.
Yeah.
That you're making these biases.
Yeah. It's like the implicit bias test, right? Everybody has these biases, right? We're not naturally aware of them. Right. And they manifest themselves. And if somebody points it out to you, you're not even aware of it. Right. Oh, did I do that? It's the old adage, there used to be an Eddie Murphy joke going around about, he gets on an elevator with some old white woman or something, and she grabs her purse or something like that, right? And the problem is that if you're not aware that you have that reaction when, black male gets on the elevator with you, right? How are you going to confront that?
Yeah.
All right. So first is acknowledging that.
But what I'll say is, if you're, and it touches to what you were saying, that you have to be self-aware.
Yeah.
Because if you're self-aware and you notice tendencies that you're making in certain situations that you're not making in other situations, then that should cause you to sit down and say, why am I making this decision in this situation and I'm not making that same decision in this situation?
Right. Right. That's a difficult thing, right? Because like you say, we're doing a whole lot of stuff, right? We got to get up and go to work in the morning, right? We got to do things on our jobs, right? So there's not much time for that. Plus, when you have downtime, a lot of people, they're not inclined to self-reflect. They're inclined to, veg out in front of TV. Watch.
TV, listen music, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Tumblr.
Yeah.
We can go on and on of like things that are bombarding us all the time. Texts, phone calls.
And if you don't have, somebody who's going to confront you on these things, right, and
that's
call
the
you
other
out.
problem is a lot of people have yes men or yes people.
Well, this is
because you want to be liked. Instead of, because we had a similar conversation with this, a friend of the podcast, Drea, yesterday, about people feeling the need, not being okay with doing your own thing, which doesn't necessarily mean that I'm saying I don't care about what you're doing, but I'm going to do what I need to do for me. And if it's not on the same train as me, that's fine. We can still be cool. We can still talk, but like, I'm going to continue doing my thing.
Yeah.
Where it seems like nowadays, like if everybody's going to the club, you don't want to go to the club, but you have to go to the club.
Yeah. Yeah.
Instead of saying, no, y'all go to the club, y'all have fun, y'all do you, I'm going to stay here and do me. And we both going to have a good time because we both in situations we want to be in. And we can get up afterwards or before whatever, but we're all doing what we want to do instead of doing what we feel we all need to do, which I think is hard for some people.
Yeah, that is hard, particularly, depending on what your age group is, but there's a lot of peer pressure involved. And these days, right, I think it's become even more compounded because, people communicate a lot more through, Facebook or, tweets, right, text messages and those things, right? But, particularly in, forums where, people are posting things to your Facebook, right, all your friends, right? If somebody posts something that is, contrary to a majority of people on that, in that circle of friends, right, they'll get jumped on, right? So,
and that's why they have a like button, not a dislike button.
Yeah. So if you have a problem with something, right, or if you disagree with, what the quote groupthink is, right, you'll either not voice it, right. In most cases, you probably won't. Right, because you don't want to suffer the flood of hate that you're going to get based on that.
Yeah, instead of people just saying, "Okay, you disagree. Well, why do you disagree?" I disagree with that, and leaving it at that is being open to the dialogue because there is opportunity for you to grow and change your opinion. Doesn't mean that you will, but having that dialogue and accepting that. Me trying to understand why you have your opinion about this and you trying to understand why I have my opinion on this is not to force us to change. It's just for us to think about it in the regard that you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it might affect change. It might not, but at least it gives you the possibility. If you never have that dialogue, there's no chance that you'll ever change because you're always going to get people agreeing with what you're agreeing with.
Yeah. And I think you have to, expose yourself to opposing thoughts and ideas. Otherwise, there's no basis to which to challenge, your assumptions, right? If everybody's agreed that the earth was flat, right?
We would be in a lot of trouble right now.
Well, yeah, half the world would be unknown to the West, right? Which may not have been a bad thing.
That may actually, we might not be in climate change right now or global
that may
warming.
not have been a bad thing, So, maybe, Columbus going, past the horizon, started up a whole chain of events that ends up destroying the world. But
he's the cause.
yeah, well, he certainly destroyed the Native American world here.
Yeah, they definitely.
Not him directly, although he was,
yeah.
he was quite brutal in his treatment of the Native Americans.
Yeah, he might be the catalyst.
But, all of the subsequent events, that occurred as a result of that. Right. So I think it's difficult to, to isolate yourself in these chat rooms, or you need to get out there and discuss. And I think, doing face-to-faces are a lot better, because, I remember in 2008, right, when Obama was running first time, and I had just started getting into Facebook and, discovered all these friends from college and whatnot. And there was a guy from Colorado who I was, pretty cool with, right? We weren't running buddies or nothing, but we were pretty cool. A white guy in Colorado, right? I think he's in finance, and banking or something out there. And then another buddy of mine, right, from Compton, right? And they were pretty hot, pretty close together, right?
Gotcha.
Back in the day. And when Obama came up, right, it was like we're looking at two different pictures, right? And they got into it so bad. And then a lot of people jumped on the white guy, right? Because, of course, he was not pro-Obama, right? Yeah. So they were, just blasting him, and he finally just got off Facebook.
Oh, wow.
Right? And, I was like, damn, this is, pretty vicious stuff.
Yeah, because I think in a normal face-to-face forum, you would have that disagreement. And in some cases, yeah, it could get heated, and it could, some cases, lead to fights. Some cases lead to not being friends anymore. But I think in most cases, especially if it was a larger group, well, I won't say larger group, but a mid-sized, let's say 4 people, that if it got to the point where it's getting malicious versus actually having a discussion, you would hope that somebody would say, all right, we ain't got to take it there. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's it's like a rap battle. You rap about it, and then it's like, okay, you talking about my mama? Come on now. All right, that's where we draw the line. Yeah, that's where we, there's a line, and then the group understands there are boundaries.
There are boundaries, right?
But we're in the internet that those boundaries are dissipating.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to, like if you're a pedestrian, right, and you're walking in, in the street, if somebody steps on your shoe or something like that, you say, excuse me, I'm sorry, and you move on, right? Right. If you're in a car, somebody cuts you off, you get all pissed, and then you want to tailgate them, and, it can escalate because you're isolated, right? And you got all this metal around you protected, right? On the internet, you kind of isolate.
And it changes that mentality. That's amazing how just that one variable, and it's not even a big variable, can change how we think to the degree of we'll be that malicious.
Yeah, it's really strange, and human nature is bizarre beyond description. You have one person sitting in a room, or let's say 2 people sitting in a room. One of them passes out. The other one will get up and try to help that person.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Now, if you have 10 people in the room and one of them passes out and falls over, everybody else is looking at
waiting for somebody else to do it.
Right. So, these are things that have been measured, right, in experiments, right, and we've seen the effects of this echo chamber. Right. In discussions on Facebook and other places, and, the Twitter rants that, people, just cyberbullying, all this kind of thing that keeps going on. And it's a function of the media, so to speak, right, in terms of how you're communicating and the separation. Right. Right. You don't really see that person. You don't really see the impact of what you're saying. It's like throwing a rock. Right. Blindly into a crowd, right? Somebody gets hit. You don't know who it was, right? You don't know if you nicked him or put his eye out.
Yeah.
And the insensitivity to the effects of your actions is the thing that's really kind of, unsettling.
It's very unsettling to me.
Yeah. And I don't know how you get past that. I think somehow there's got to be, new training methods or teaching in the schools to sensitize people to these things, right? Because unless it's like, there's a method of teaching racial intolerance, right? The effects of racial intolerance, right? Where you take a group, half the class, and you make them,
like I can't think of the lady that I seen do it, but I know what you're talking about.
All right, so you make one half of the class has privileges, the other half of the class doesn't. Right? It's just arbitrary, and you see the people who don't have the privileges, they get to feel what it's like. So once you feel what it's like, right, then you can empathize with people, and then you won't want to do it.
Yeah, I seen a video of them doing that with a whole group of white children, and they split up the class and said half of you are black, half of you are white, and the reaction of one girl was it just showed she broke down so bad because she was like, no, I don't want to, and she was like, well, you don't have a choice. You're black. This is what happens to them. She was like, if you can't deal with it, get out the class. And she was like, I don't want to leave. She was like, those are your two choices. And like the fact that it broke her down like that, it really enlightened and highlighted how difficult it can be. And even taking out color, just you can go class, you can go race, you can go religion, whatever. And when you have those divisions and are oppressing somebody in that regard, it is hard for them to see it if they're not put in those positions.
Right.
But once to me, there is liability or responsibility rather, is when you're enlightened to these responsibilities or you're enlightened to these privileges that you have to then dig deeper and find out, are you one of these people that are having these privileges or are you not? Are you one of them, you know what I'm saying? Like, because they're oppressed, no, they're oppressed.
Right. Yeah.
So, so like, that's what I mean. At some point, if you have to take responsibility as the privilege and say, you know what, I am privileged and I need to change my behavior based on that. If I am treating somebody and abusing that privilege towards somebody else. Yeah. Because then you're at fault too.
Yeah. Yeah. But we talk about, developing empathy from these roles. Now, a cynical person told me, he says, he asked me a question. He said, what's the dream of the slave? And I said, freedom. And he says, no, it's to become the slave master. Right. So you think about it, some people will take that experience and have empathy and say, I never want anyone to suffer like I have. Yeah. Other people will take that experience and say, I don't want to be the one suffering. I want to be the one inflicting suffering. I want to be the one in charge. So there's two outcomes from that kind of sensitization. How do you move it past that? I think there's got to be some level of values that need to be learned, right? Or could be learned to allow people to have a choice where there's this principle of, harming others versus, helping myself.
Yeah. Having that balance
and making that right choice or, what I'm calling the right choice. Yeah. I believe that to be the right choice.
Yeah. That theory or that idea, and that can be seen in various areas too, not just with race, but parents that are children that are in abusive houses, they do split and tend to be in that degree, or alcoholic families, or even hazing in fraternities. Yeah. It's passed down. You got hazed. When the next line comes in, you're going to haze them. And to a point, it used to escalate to a point where then they had to start actually then, regulating it and banning it, even though we know it still happens. But anyways, like so like you said, it is seen in other areas. So it is interesting. And I think it is going to, like you said, it's something hard to determine and fix. And there has to be some values, because if you don't have the value, then you don't understand why it's worth doing what you're doing.
Yeah. I think, one of the things that, we do a very poor job of in education is any type of spiritual development, right? That's something that's, supposedly left to the purview of religion, right? And what religion doesn't really teach you that either, right? Most religions, right? They teach you to memorize texts, right? And to say prayers and to follow certain routines
and rituals. Yeah.
Right. But they don't tell you how to make these evaluations, on your own. Right. So you'll just follow these things, lockstep. Right. But you're going to find situations that don't fall into those preordained
Yeah, because
scenarios,
there's
right?
those gray areas.
Yeah. And what do you do for those? And, what you do, what a lot of people do, it's either black or white, right? So good or bad. That's bad. Okay. That's it. Not going to deal with it in any other fashion. But the world is, it's not, a binary thing.
No.
The world is, it's analog.
Yeah.
Right. So you can go from the darkest of dark to the whitest of white and everything in between.
Yeah, it's a large spectrum.
Yeah. It's funny. We're all the way here from
Gil Scott Heron.
from Gil Scott Heron's.
So I wanted to tie that back because I know we've been talking you guys' ear off for a minute. So to tie it back to Gil Scott Heron, I think if you haven't heard it, I think you should check it out. I do think there are so many correlations between that song and what was going on at that time as we've gone through and today. And so if anything that I would take away from it is try not to repeat the history, you know what I'm saying? By learning by these mistakes and learning by the successes and to avert the path of the past and try to change the future for the better. What would you say is your overall takeaway from it?
Well, I think
to wrap it up.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Recognize that things, repeat, and understand that, today is no different than 35 years ago. A lot of similarities in terms of, what was pitched, what was bought, and what the outcome was.
Yeah.
Right. So I know a lot of people think that this is the worst thing that's ever happened. It ain't. It's happened before.
We made it through it then, so
yeah.
Hopefully we can continue to make it through it now, though. As we said, we definitely, it seems like we both agree that we need to learn from these mistakes. Mm-hmm. Like you said, things haven't changed as much as we think they have.
Right.
But I feel like we need to use this as an opportunity to effect change.
And I think one of the key things, is the first line, mandate my ass, right? Which is, a diss to the winner, but it's also a diss to people who don't vote. You got to vote.
Yeah. In your local as well as your presidential.
Yeah.
Both.
You got to vote, right? Because if you don't vote, then you're like a leaf being blown wherever the wind blows you, right? You have no control of what happens or you're just passive. Now, a lot of people don't vote because they don't think that their vote's going to count.
Or they don't like the candidate.
Or they don't like the candidate.
But you can vote to get the legislation for how the candidates are picked changed by voting.
Yeah. But look at this. 90 million people didn't vote in the last election. That's more votes than any of the candidates got by themselves. Right.
If you wrote in who you wanted.
Right. If everyone agreed on a third party guy, right, to vote in, and every one of those 90 million people voted for him, that
or
guy
her.
would, or her, they would be the president today.
So that means your vote has weight.
Absolutely.
And so that's another good point that we constantly say on the Stay Woke podcast, that voting is important. If you want to affect change, that's one way to do it.
And one cool thing about what we have today in terms of media access, we don't have to go through, CNN or Fox News, all right, to get to voters, right? We can go direct.
Yeah.
Right. So we could build an internet candidate.
Yeah.
Right. Now, the important thing is that people have got to get out there and vote. And I know there's a lot of impediments, but that's probably for a different discussion.
Yeah. We'll have to have a part 2.
Yeah. So
I want to say thank you for coming and talking to me and talking to us and talking to our listeners about this and introducing me to this track in the first place. Because I didn't know about the song prior. I knew about Gil Scott Heron because of the prior track that we mentioned, but I think it's an important song that needs to be heard. And as we say at the Stay Woke podcast and the sonicbreakdown.com, sharing music is important. Being around people that are creative, being around people talking about creations creates an environment of creativity. And in that, a lot of positive things can happen and usually do happen. I think that's evident with the Women's March that happened today. And hopefully that I want to quickly just touch on that one real quick is that I hope that the amount of women that we saw gathering at Oakland, Chicago, New York, DC, London, Tokyo, that this is not just a one-time thing. This is as I stated on my Instagram post, is that this is just a spark for a flame that's going to give us long-lasting change. That's going to keep that flame burning for not just women's rights, equal rights with religions, with the LGBT community, with people of color, that, you know, we all use this force of solidarity to effectively make a change. That's what I wanted to touch on, just real quick. So again, thank you for listening to the Stay Woke podcast. It's presented by thesonicbreakdown.com. Check out our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/staywokepodcast. And thank you again for Uncle David for rocking with us.
Thanks for having me.
You know our motto: live, listen to some great music, and above all, love more. We out.
Peace.